So thank you, Tricia, for having me. And it's been lovely to meet those of you that I've met, and I'd love to meet you all. When I leave tomorrow, I am going to go home through College Station. My youngest son Monday started his senior year at A&M, and he left home 10 days ago, and I did too. I left to go on a trip the same day that he was leaving, and I thought it was brilliant because I didn't have to wave goodbye and sadly watch him drive off. Instead, he got to drop me off at the airport and wave goodbye to me. And the very last thing that I said to him when I leaned into his truck to hug him goodbye, I said, "Don't forget your pillow." And I said that because the last 2 years, he's forgotten his pillow. And so I'm going to go by and take his pillow to him tomorrow. So, and actually, if y'all want to know the truth, I made a little video and I put it on Instagram saying like goodbye and don't forget your pillow. And I do not know how this happened, but almost 30,000 people now have watched it. And so I said, "Jacob, I have so much documentation that I told you not to forget your pillow." And so anyway, but he is our only boy. He has 3 older sisters, and Jacob was, we assume, born. We didn't realize until he was about 7th grade, but he does not have a sense of smell. He cannot smell anything. We've done MRIs, we've done all kinds of things, and it's just the way that God made him. And so anyway, he constantly walks around the house asking, like, do I smell okay? And he'll toss his shirts to his sisters and go, "Is this okay? Can I wear this? Is it clean?" And because he can't smell anything. Our 3rd daughter, Savannah, has like a heightened sense of smell. Like all of the smells overwhelm her or overpower her. And so she's very sensitive to it. And, but I think oftentimes smells, they kind of evoke images in our minds. I got a text while I was gone on my trip from our 2nd daughter, Brittany, and she said, "Mom, I went to my Bible study tonight, and the woman whose home it was in had a fall candle out," and she said, "It just reminded me of home." And that's what smells do sometimes too. They bring up images. Sometimes they're not pleasant. There are plenty of unpleasant smells as well. And we were just on this trip that I was on, we were in a hotel, and I kept going, "This is the best smell." And the concierge said, "Well, this hotel has a signature scent." And apparently, so many hotels have that signature scent. And I'll tell you, we as Christian women have a signature scent as well. It is the fragrance of Christ. It is the aroma of Christ. And one of my favorite smells is the stargazer lily, that flower that it was what we used in our wedding. And so my husband usually brings it for our anniversary. And I just love, because even a single stalk, is that what you call it? Stalk? A flower? A single stem, it just fills up the whole room with that beautiful, beautiful smell. And the bluebonnet, it has no smell. And so I want us as women, as Christian women, as believers in Christ, as followers of Christ, to, with our aroma of Christ, with our fragrance of Christ, fill up the whole room with that knowledge, that just presence of Him in our lives. And so anyway, like I said, Christ is our signature scent, so to speak. And so we have that knowledge of Christ in us. There's a verse I want us to look at. It's 2 Corinthians 2, verses 14 through 16. And I have it up here. And it says, "But thanks be to God, who always leads us in triumph in Christ, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of Him everywhere. For we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To the one we are the fragrance of death, to other the fragrance of life." So I'll tell you just a little bit about Paul's imagery when he was writing this. He was speaking to, the people in Corinth who would understand that back in those days, the general who had gone out to war, had gone out to battle. When that general was victorious, he would come back to town and he would be riding in the front of, I guess, a chariot, whatever they rode in, a chariot. And then there would be all of his people behind him. He was the victor. He was at the front of the chariot, but behind him, all of the people were waving incense. It was the smell of victory. They went all through the town parading around with this smell, with this incense flowing. But it says, but to the other, it was the smell of death. That was the people behind who had become the prisoners of war, who were going to, a death more than likely, or at least into slavery. And so that is what Paul was saying. He said, we as Christians, Christ is our general. He is at the front of our chariot. He is our victor. And we're the people behind him, just like the people that were behind the general in those days, spreading the incense, the aroma, the fragrance of Christ to the world. And so how do we practically do that? How do we spread the fragrance of Christ, or the incense of Christ, to the world? And the first thing I will say is that the fragrance is Christ in us. So when we have Christ in us, we carry that scent to the world. And, I said there are fragrances that aren't pleasant to smell, right? Those in our lives can be, bitterness was mentioned earlier, envy, pride, selfishness, or we can fill our lives with the fragrance of Christ, his love, his mercy, his grace. And like a bottle of perfume, if you just set a bottle of perfume in a room with the lid on it, it's not going to fill up the room, but when you take the lid off, it spills out. You can smell it all across the room so often. And so that is what we want to be. We want to spread that knowledge that is knowing Christ to the world. It might be an encouraging smile that you give someone. It might be an encouraging word. It might be, all kinds of things. It might just be that it's your peace. It might just be that it's your joy that you have in your life, even in spite of difficult circumstances. You just never know what someone needs in their lives. But it doesn't matter. I think that we think about being the fragrance of Christ to the world, and that is, I don't know, people at church, people in the community, whatever. But we're also to be the fragrance of Christ in our homes. I think sometimes that's the hardest place. The people that we know the best. But we want to be the fragrance of Christ everywhere we go. So how do we do this? Like I said, we love others, we forgive, we have the joy, and we have the peace. And I want to share just a couple of practical examples of ways, or ways that really the Lord has shown me, talking about just living in the peace and in the joy that is Christ. The first story that I want to tell you is our family, just as the kids were growing up, we loved to watch the show The Voice. Were any of y'all Voice watchers or still Voice watchers? This one was several years ago, this particular season, but it was when Pharrell was one of the judges, and Carson Daly is the host. And there were these two just absolutely amazing gospel singers. And they were in the duel round where they both sang a duet together. And then Pharrell, when they finished, had to pick one of them to be the winner. And it was a man and a woman, and they're both pretty young. And the man told his story, and he had grown up in the church and sang in the church. And his dad was the minister of the church, and he wanted to be a gospel singer. And then they told the woman's story. Her name was Celeste, and she said, I grew up in the church as well, and I wanted to be a singer. And she said, but some choices in my life led me down different paths. And she said, I found myself in high school pregnant, and I had my baby, and I joined the Army. And in the Army, I married a man, and we've had 2 more kids. And they're showing her story, and she's sitting typing at a computer. And she said, this is not where I saw my life. And she said, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity tonight to get to be on The Voice and to sing. And just, again, another inspirational story. And let me tell you, you can actually watch this. You can look it up on YouTube. But when those two sang, it was one of the most amazing performances that I have ever seen. I mean, you're sitting at home on your couch. We had chill bumps, our whole family. We were just like, could not believe, just astounded by their talent. All 4 judges gave a standing ovation, which doesn't happen that often. And they all looked at Pharrell, who had to decide between the two. And I remember them looking at him going, what are you going to do? And he said, I have no idea. And he sat down and he put his head down. And Carson Daly, the host, said, Pharrell, I know this is a difficult decision, but who do you pick? And he looked up and he said, either one of you could win the show. Either one. And he said, but I'm going to pick. And he picked the guy. And his family went crazy and the crowd went crazy. And he went and hugged Pharrell and he went off. And Celeste was left standing there. And Carson Daly said, Celeste, do you have anything that you want to say to the judge before you leave? And she put her head down too and was quiet for a minute, and then she looked up and she said, I want to thank you for the opportunity. But before she even got the whole word opportunity out, her voice began to crack. And she stopped talking. And then she began to sing, it is well with my soul. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. And ladies, that was the aroma of Christ spreading out into that room. Not even into that room, but into the rooms of everyone watching on television as well, because here was a woman who was standing in her disappointment. She was standing already in a life that hadn't turned out quite like she thought. And then she thought she had this other opportunity. And again, her hopes were dashed. But in that moment, she confidently said to everyone listening, it is well with my soul. I want us to be those women. I want us, as we're walking out, as we're wanting to be the fragrance and the aroma of Christ in the world, to be those women who, even when life doesn't turn out like we thought, we can still say, it is well with our soul. And if you're anything like me, I hope you're not, but I can be controlling sometimes, or a lot. And I like to be in control. And I will tell you that, especially having children, and the Lord taught me this, and I'm so thankful that he did, but when our oldest was, she was going into her sophomore year of college, so it's been a while now, but there was just some situations in our family at the time that were very difficult. And they were things that I wanted to control, and I felt like I had no control. I felt like things actually were kind of spinning out of control. And I don't know, I prayed about it, but I still was just like, oh, and I gave the Lord quite a few suggestions. If you could do this, that would be great, or if you could work this out, that would be great. And during that time, our family, my parents took our family and my sister's family to Florida and for a vacation. And when we were on our way to Florida, my son, who was probably 10 at the time, said, he said, hey, can we go deep sea fishing when we were down in Florida? And we had never done that before. And so I started calling around, and I found a place that said we could come and fish. And they said, but you have to be there at 5:30 in the morning. And there were 6 slots on the boat, and I thought, well, I don't need one of those slots because I don't do 5:30 in the morning. And but so my sister wanted to go, 2 of my kids, two of my girls, and then my dad went, and my husband, and there was one spot left. And the kids were like, Mom, please go, please go. And so I thought, well, I'll go, fine. I'll go more really, I thought, as kind of the documentarian. I wanted to take the pictures and, see, my kids catch their, first deep sea fish. And so anyway, so we get in the boat, and if you've done it, I mean, you go way, way out. It was probably a 2-hour ride that we rode out in this boat. And so I slept during that time. And but anyway, so we get out there, and the captain of our ship starts giving of our boat, not really a ship, but boat, and he gave us directions on what we were supposed to do. And he gave out these, if you've done this, these belts that you put around you, and your fishing rod went in the belt. And he described everything you were supposed to do. All of that to say, I wasn't really listening because I thought I'm just going to be taking pictures. But then he began to hand out the belts, and he handed me one. And so I thought, well, I mean, why not? And so I put it on, and I looked at my daughter, Brittany, that was sitting next to me, and I said, now, what are we supposed to do? And she said, well, Mom, you let your line just go out until it stops, and then you roll it up 10 times. And so I did that, and as I was rolling up, I was on about 8, 9, and right about 10, something got on my line. No one else, we've just gotten out there. And by the way, my son, who was the one that really wanted to come, and my husband were both very, very sick. They were hanging off of the side of the boat. And so here I was, the one that didn't even want to come, and I'm starting to reel it in, and I cannot believe. And I'm very excited, and I'm saying, I got a fish, the first fish, And so I began reeling it up, and as it continued, it got heavier and heavier and heavier. I thought that I must have caught just something we were going to hang on the mantle. Something really big. But I kept on going and kept on going. And I remember looking at my daughter and saying, my shoulder is really hurting. my arm is hurting, and telling her things like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to need, physical therapy on Monday. And it got harder and harder and harder to where I thought I can't go anymore. And the captain was over helping my husband and my son, and I looked over at him, and I said, just in all honesty, I said, I don't know what to do. I don't think I can do this. And I should tell you that the captain of our boat was, he had a very, very thick Cajun accent. We were in Florida, but he had this Cajun accent. And he said, step back and lay down. And I said, excuse me? And he said, step back and lay down. I had no idea. And I said, I'm so sorry. Could you say that again, please? And he said, step back. And I said, did you say step back? And he said, yes. And so I took a step back. And he said, now lay it down. And I said, lay what down? And he said, the rod, lay the rod down. And this is what I want you to know what was going through my mind at the time, because I thought, well, I cannot lay the rod down, sir, because it's in this belt. And if I pull it out of this belt, it's so heavy that it's going to flip over into the ocean, spiral around. I'm going to have to pay you for this, and I've already paid plenty of money to even be on this boat. I'm not going to buy the fishing pole as well. And so I said, I don't think I could do that. And he said, no, lay it down. And he was very commanding. And so I pulled it out. And it didn't spin out, and I laid it down. And he said, now do it. Reel it. And just like that, I cannot explain it except that all of the weight was now on the boat, and the fish just popped right up. And it wasn't the biggest thing to go on the mantle, but it was a pretty red snapper. It was probably that big. I don't know why it was so heavy. But anyway, I went on that day to catch 6 more, but let me tell you, that was the limit. I'm so proud of that. But anyway, but let me tell you what just kept resonating that day was what that captain had said to me. Because as I told you, we were in such a season of life where there was so much that honestly I felt like I needed to hold on to. And I felt like if I didn't hold on to it, things were gonna spiral out of control. But what that captain of that boat said to me was the same thing truly that our Savior says to us, which is step back and lay it down. Give it to me. He even says, cast your burdens on the Lord. And ladies, that is how we walk in peace. We don't try to control it all, but rather we hand it to him. We give it to him. And that is how, in a world filled with things that are not going our way or feel out of control or anything like that, that we can walk in the peace and the joy and the knowledge of the Lord. And so I want us, as we're leaving here today, to be just those women who walk, like I said, in the joy and the peace, and who spread that fragrance of life, spread that fragrance of Christ everywhere. And you know, it says to one, it is the smell of victory. And for those of us who are believers, we have the joy of heaven that awaits us. And it said for others, it is death. And we don't want that for anyone in the world, right? So we want to go and we want to spread the fragrance, the aroma of Christ to everyone in the world. Let him be your signature scent.